launch. We're so glad you could make it. I'm your moderator for the morning, Dion Jackson-Milo. Very special welcome to those of you joining us online via Facebook and YouTube. Although the pandemic has unfortunately limited the number of us who can gather in one space, at the same time, it has allowed us much wider reach in ways that we perhaps weren't doing so much before the pandemic. So we're so glad to have you joining us virtually. A very special welcome to Mr. John McIntyre, Chargé d'Affaires at the U.S. Embassy, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, Dr. the Honorable Horace Chang. We will be hearing from them shortly. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to you both. This morning, the USA-funded Local Partner Development is launching the Core Partners Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Program. Now, 3 civil society organizations, the Violence Prevention Alliance, the Peace Management Initiative, and the Multi-Care Youth Foundation, will be awarded grants totaling just over $156 million. That's just over $1 million US. Let me congratulate them and welcome their representatives. Mrs. Alicia Glasgow-Gentles, the Executive Director of the Multi-Care Youth Foundation. Mr. Damian Hutchinson is Executive Director of the Peace Management Initiative, and Dr. Deanna Ashley, the Executive Director of the Violence Prevention Alliance. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Michelle Stewart, the Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Specialist at Local Partner Development. Now, Local Partner Development is a 6-year activity funded by USAID through the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative and implemented by FHI 360. I should let you know that elsewhere, just about now, the National Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee is updating the media on their work, and it's critical that programs like these are facilitated and encouraged and succeed so that committees like that have less and less work to do over time. In a very short while, we'll have the signing of the grants. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion, which we've dubbed Effective Youth Crime and Violence Prevention, bringing the right tools to the fight. You'll be hearing more about the work that's being done and the critical importance to the effective fight against crime. And I use the word effective very deliberately there. We'll also be exploring the whole concept of evidence-based prevention of crime and violence, and importantly, the kind of difference it will make. First, though, let me once again introduce you to Mr. John McIntyre, Chargé d'Affaires at the U.S. Embassy. Mr. McIntyre assumed duties as Deputy Chief of Mission for the U.S. Embassy Jamaica and the role as Chargé d'Affaires most recently this month. Please welcome him to say a few words.
Good morning, good morning. Hope everybody's well. Dr. the Honorable Horace Chang, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, also one of our favorite, if not the favorite minister to work with. Jason Fraser, USAID Country Representative, also the best dressed person in the room currently. Marina Krajnovic, I was close, from Croatia, our Chief of Party Local Partner Development Project. Representatives of the Core Partners Youth Crime Violence Prevention Program, Multi-Care Youth Foundation, Peace Management Initiative, and the Violence Prevention Alliance. Representative of the Government of Jamaica, distinguished participants and guests, and of course, members of the media, always our favorites. Good morning. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here on behalf of the people of the United States of America to participate in the launch of this important youth crime and violence prevention program. The U.S. government remains, and I really want to emphasize this, remains committed to helping the government and people of Jamaica to achieve the national development goals under Vision 2030. I am proud that through USAID, we are partnering not only with the government of Jamaica, but with local organizations that are equally committed to helping solve Jamaica's longstanding challenges with crime, issues that we too in the United States share. This partnership is an indication of the priority placed on the young people in this country and the confidence we have in their abilities to champion and make change for the better. Local organizations such as Multi-Care Youth Foundation, Peace Management Initiative, and the Violence Prevention Alliance know the challenges that youth and their communities face. Success requires their involvement, and we welcome the opportunity to collaborate with them, but just as importantly, with the Ministry of National Security. I understand that they have already started rolling out an interrelated set of services to youth who are at the highest risk of involvement in crime and violence in Trenchtown and Whitfield Town. Some of the services that will be provided to youth are vocational training to improve employment opportunities, mentorship, and counseling. Youth will also be taught the very critical how to resolve conflict. The programs will be expanded to other communities and police divisions with similar profiles, including those that have some of the country's highest homicide rates. Crime and violence have a devastating impact on the economic and human development of any country and in any country. That is why this challenge remains a key priority, not just for the government of Jamaica, but also for the U.S. government. Since 2009, yes, all the way back in 2009, the U.S. government, through the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and you know we love our acronyms, so it's called CBSI, has partnered with Jamaica and other CARICOM governments to increase citizen security. And this is a great fact, so if the press wants to quote this one, please do this. Between 2010 and 2019, the USAID mission in Jamaica has programmed over $75 million US helping Jamaica to improve citizen security. We remain committed today, that's the second time I said committed, as we were 10 years ago, to working closely with our partners to increase safety and security in Jamaica. The launch of this youth crime and violence network involving these outstanding 3 civil society organizations signals the kind of coordinated leadership, again, coordination across the U.S. government, led by USAID in this particular case, at the local level that is essential if we are to achieve the goal of youth crime prevention and improving citizen security. It is our hope that under this network, a steady change will evolve, a change that empowers a cadre of youth who will in turn positively influence their peers. Our support remains steadfast in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean. This will not change. There's another quote for you. And together, we will make our communities, our countries, and our region more peaceful, secure, and prosperous. I would like to wish these partners every success in charting a new course that gives youth of this country the opportunity to live productive and meaningful lives away from crime and violence. These young people have the potential to positively contribute to the growth and development of Jamaica. Together, let us continue to support, mentor, and steer them in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. McIntyre. You know, Dr. Horace Chang has been Minister of National Security for about 2.5 years, and I think I interview him about once a month for every bit of that time. But as a member of Parliament for Northwest St. James since 2002, he's represented some of Montego Bay's grittiest communities. He's seen firsthand for years the tremendous challenges that our young people, that our youth at risk face in trying to resist the call to crime and violence. We're pleased to have him here, and we ask you to welcome him to say a few words.
Thank you, moderator. What Leon didn't mention is that I used to see her on the streets of Montego Bay at a different time with our camera and all the other accoutrements of journalism. When we met at some unfortunate incidents at the time too, as Montego Bay for some time has had some of the toughest challenges. And both as a representative and a journalist, we would have to wend our way to certain spots in the constituency. Mr. John McIntyre, or Charge Jeffrey of the Embassy of the United States, and I have Mr. Jason Fraser, Ms. Moreno, not sure if I have that in the right order, representing the United States government from the embassy, members of the Partnership from the Civil Society Organization, Multicare Youth Foundation, the Violence Prevention Alliance, Dr. Dan Ashley, long-standing friend and professional in the field of public health. Now, you applying those principles to this particular area, and of course, members of the Peace Management Initiative, that's Mr. Hutchison, right? Thank you. Members of the media, and all right. thought it was a better thing to do, what safe one. Other, well, it protects the back. Thank you. Other members of the well-wisher and ladies and gentlemen visiting here this morning, and all those who are here for this particular event, good morning, and let me express my pleasure at joining in this particular event this morning. This is part of the government of the United States support for local partnership development through the particular program. I think this is the FH1360, that's the government tagline. Jamaica as a society has a relatively young population, which has positives, unfortunately has some negatives. But as part of a developing country, having a young population is of course an opportunity, because the most productive part of the society is your young population. In fact, some of the more developed societies are concerned that they have too much of an aging population. But among the challenges we face in our youth is, of course, youth crime and violence. In taking some statistics this morning, there are some 190 youth offenders across 4 juvenile correction centers across Jamaica. Of that, 137 are boys. And that confirms the fact that the big problem we have in Jamaica is among our young males. Some time ago, a long time ago, when we did a socio-economic survey in Montego Bay, household survey, it turned up with 78% of the boys dropped out by grade 9. And in fact, even more recent statistics seem to confirm that, because in my brief I have here, it is indicated that most of our boys only stay in school until the average age for school leavers among males is 16.4, 16 years and 4 months, and for girls 19 years and 4 months. When one examined at grade 9, really they're about 14, 15, realized that the 70+% dropout is still holding. But my survey was done back in 2005, 2004. This was done in 2018. And sometime when I speak, of course, I clash with my friends in social intervention programs, because I maybe say the things the way it should be said. And maybe I should quote from Capri, who said it better. But that kind of persistent failure to impact on the fate of our young males over a 20-year period, tell me we're not doing some things right. We're doing a lot of things, good things, but we certainly are not doing them right if we continue to have that kind of thing. Maybe much of that's to how government operates. The situation, of course, can also be viewed from the point of view of those incarcerated. In 2019, we arrested some 1,259 young people between 12 and 24 years. These are for serious crimes. Other things were out there, of course. This included 260 for robbery, 240 for murder, 239 for break-ins, and 230 for shooting. And it is appropriate to combine shootings and murder, because every bullet is designed to kill. The profile of the person detained, of course, at these adult correctional facilities, we observe below 25 years, some 20.4%. And this, of course, among findings done not just by the ministry, but corroborated by work done by the Inter-American Development Bank and agencies like Capri, who now bring some kind of empirical-based activity to the entire process. It is here to point out that the educational achievement of the young males were quite different. Some 59% of the incarcerated men did not complete high school, secondary level education. Jamaica may use that term. Again, reinforcing the original fact, which I said has been going on for some 20 years, that some over 70% of our young males, especially in the urban centers, are dropping out of school by grade 9. And the rest of them functionally illiterate and functionally numerate, and therefore oftentimes make them unemployable, and they have to resort to gangs for survival, for their own identity, and for their own self-respect and sense of power, which is what the gun give them. It's also confirmed, as I said, so we're not experiencing the impact of that kind of imbalance in our system. So What that points, of course, that there is significant failure in the social services provided in these particular communities. And we reap the sin-off in the gangs that they join. Because young men who leave school functionally inumerate and illiterate, once they still have a spirit about them, they find a way to assert themselves and to see if they can assert their identity, and they resort to essentially primitive mechanism, which is violence. The emergence of this, of course, is hundreds of gangs across Jamaica. I won't close the gross figure, but of course, during the course 2019, there are about just under 400 very active gangs. The result of that is, of course, that homicide remains our biggest problem. Jamaica homicide rate is the highest in the democracy, take as a country. If we take individual communities, we may find comparable areas, because the challenge of providing young males with adequate education, opportunity for dignity and development, is a problem of many urban inner city areas. And while Jamaica as a country have the highest, if we go into certain inner city, or what they call the favelas of South America, some in African continent, and even Asia, which is not as violence prone, and some of our, at different times, some of the tough areas in North American cities, you find extremely high rate of violence, and basically young males, and in particular young black males, killing each other wantonly and with impunity. It is therefore a significant problem of the urban centers, but this morning we're dealing with Jamaican conditions, and we have to find a way to overcome this, because in many ways, Jamaica is a relatively small jurisdiction, and while the activities take place in an urban center, it affects the entire country. Indeed, when one examines the statistics, there's a southern crescent which extends from St. Thomas in the east to Duane Park in the west, which is maybe the greatest concentration of gangs and the highest incidence of homicide in Jamaica today. They take that from, at one stage, what was happening in Montego Bay. And if I pause here and debate, I was asked recently, and it's of some question that I had hoped the academics would seek to try and answer. Montego Bay had by far the highest homicide rate in 2017. We went up to 335 in gross numbers, which was an average, when averaged out, and that was over 150 per 100,000. It is, without seeking to criticize the operation, of course, Montego Bay House, just point out some facts. I was asked by an international worker just last week, how is it that Montego Bay has the highest murder rate in the globe and has the highest growth rate in the Caribbean region? It's a question that sometimes it deserves those who are going to intervene should ask themselves, because that economic activity is based on tourism, which in what you might call the academic world, which is distant from the real world somewhat, is one of the most sensitive industry to crime and violence. Yet in a society with the highest rate in the globe, we have one of the fastest growing tourism. In fact, one of the fastest growing service sector, because in all of that, we not only have a booming tourist industry, but we employ some 20,000 people in the outsourcing services, which is another aspect of the service industry. Underlying it, of course, is gang activity. One of the observations, of course, is that gangsters kill gangsters. And that raises issues of how society regards them, whether there's a symbiotic relationship between the society and the gangsters. The gangsters themselves are not involved in, and let me pause here. You end up with a society which seems to think, if I'm not involved, everything is okay. Because the gangsters themselves, who are killing each other, will not interfere with those who are not involved in their gangsterism. Tourists are, in fact, part of their almost a client pool. They will send tourist drugs. They'll find individuals in there to get addresses and information on the United States who, because of the advanced credit fraud, is critical, although they get that information from other areas. But there is a kind of paradox in dealing with crime in our society. And unfortunately, it's reflected in some of the values articulated, and it's as if what a former Prime Minister, Mr. Fallon, said, there are two societies in Jamaica. And it has remained like this for the last many years since independence. And rather than get better, it unfortunately seems to be getting worse. There's, at the time, I said, there's Jamaica above crossroads and Jamaica below crossroads. And it poses problem for us since working several, and I will not try to articulate that this morning in this a short time. But there are some practical sides to it. The Jamaica uptown seeks to institutionalize the values, the modern values of a civilized society, put it very shortly, and to have all government services operated on that basis. In that atmosphere, on that side of Jamaica, we have quality private schools, prep schools, quality high schools supported by parent teachers and the parents as a whole, and the government. We have community policing, and you want policemen who are dressed as customer service individuals. You have training institute, university students, and what you want is student loans or supporting for university students. And you can go and list them. You have quality health facilities. And the services, half our dentists in Jamaica are concentrated in that zone, in the corporate area alone. So all public health care is available of a certain quality and distinction which is comparable with anywhere in the globe. When I go below there, policemen are killed. Their families are attacked. Those in the middle of it are not getting the long-term benefit necessary unless there's complete coordination that the core activities of social intervention reach the humble people who are there, and we begin to divert them from the gangs. The final component of that we would come is that in intervening in these communities, the government's flagship program now, a couple of them, Zones of Special Operation, Jamaica National Service Corps, are critical players in all of this. We don't have the money to all we would like, but the Zones of Special Operation is crucial and absolutely necessary. Strong policing, in fact, has to be a part of dealing with that side of Jamaica. Strong, but fair and just. Police brutality is not accepted. But it has to be strong policing. I don't want to apologize. We need, when you have a homicide rate of 100,000, it's we have an emergency. To debate that is idiotic, at best. It means you don't value the life of the people who are being killed. You value the life of those who are doing the killing. And if you have to stop the killing, and then you have to disrupt the gangs. There's no other way to do it. If you do significant social intervention, and I noticed that when Capri did a study, we have our differences, but I think it was a reasonable study, guns out, point out that sometimes you end up helping the gangs. The reality is that a gangster, if you're doing something good, and you come and say, go ahead. Whether he's smiling or not, and he's a gangster, you must get him out. There's no other way to transform the community. You have to get them out, and that's hard policing, and the government is committed to equipping the police and training them to do just that. Having got them out, all these things we're doing must have come in as we're doing in seeking to do in a number of areas now, and would like to expand into the 25 toughest communities. Because of interest, somewhere like Augustown is almost social intervention overwhelmed, or should I say, drunk. Since I've been in university, which is some time ago, we have been doing intervention in Augustown. But what we have is a core of, an increasing core of young men who have adopted the gangs. We have to isolate, separate those who can be rescued and put them into productive programs. Some of them will work with the various organizations here. The government have to get them into mainstream programs, productive training programs, At this point in time, the one I feel best about is the Jamaica National Service Corps, which trains them both in not only in military skills, but have a strong technical program. We have expanded to Montego Bay, but it has a strong character building component. And when, of course, they're being taught by soldiers, gangsters don't come around. Thank God for that. So the essential core of our activity is to, I said, disrupt the gangs. Those who are core criminals, the police they provide the requisite support to find evidence and convert the information to evidence and lock them up. Others we rescue by providing alternative to a productive society. And most of them are want that. What I will say, most of those who are born in these difficult situations, who face challenges, will tell you if given an alternative, they will accept it. And I believe in that, which is why I'm here. Because every young man I talk to want to have a life. Most times, some who are gone far, I have a young man say, well, Doc, I'm going to die, but make sure my child go to good school. They're that fatalistic. So the launch of this program will complement that base, because when we have removed the gangs, disrupted them, offered training to a number of them through the formal institutions, whether Jamaica National Service Corps, high school, better schools, better training institutions, the kind of work done by the agencies here will be not only welcome, but very necessary, because there's emerging not only the gangsters, but a kind of violence that is beyond criminality. It's become a culture of violence that can only be done by continuing mentoring, counseling, interfacing with others who can show them a new direction. And therefore, the work of the Multi-Care Youth Foundation, Violence Prevention, and PMI in this area, certainly we have other difference, but in this kind of activity is welcome and basically adds to the program. Complements what we're seeking to do, and if we get enough of these done, enough of this kind of activity, where we can impact enough numbers, and that really means at some point I must have strong programs with the mainstream government programs in all 100 named communities across Jamaica that have socio-economic deficiencies, but in particular for security, the 25 primary communities where some 80% of our gangs operate from. Maybe over near 80% of those incarcerated are derived from, and where most of the homicides are committed, unfortunately. And these are the people's lives who we have to seek to transform. So again, to Mr. McIntyre, let me commend the U.S. government for their support. The United States government has been a long-standing partner with Jamaica in many areas in security. If one would consider this is also an area of security, because we build stronger communities, seek to strengthen our institutions, we will provide a foundation which we can build a much more peaceful, safe, and prosperous society. Much more I could say. It's an area which I feel very strongly about. But I said, let me congratulate those who are here and commend you. Much work has to be done in the community. It involves everyone, and in particular in these so-called garrison communities, tough communities. I don't like the term garrison, but they're informal, they are difficult. We have to get the non-government, the government, and all the other civil society groups, inclusive of churches. I don't see enough of them because, and the political parties, because there is a common program that I close off that says, break down garrisons. Well, garrisons are not building you tear down and move. In fact, if the government decides to tear down the buildings and move the people, we get a protest from the international community. That's very inhuman. It's about character and community base. And we have, in a lot of these communities, the two only broad-based community organizations, the churches, which are very extensive and can play a critical role, and political parties. All of the organizations are really superficial and very ephemeral in these communities. And we have to engage all of them in seeking to not only reduce the homicide, disrupt gangs, but transforming the community. And that's the note I like to end, because ultimately, unless there's transformative impact, there's nothing sustainable. And that is the object of the government. But again, thank you for your support and look forward to, I'm sure we'll meet with these organizations, some of these communities, the government programs, and we hope we will work in a symbiotic and complementary way, not a contentious way. Thank you again, and I said thank you for the support to these communities and to the team. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. Don't sit down. Don't sit down, Dr. Chang. We're going to invite you and Mr. McIntyre to go to the signing table to witness the signing. We're also inviting the Chief of Party of Local Partner Development, Marana Smudlaka Krinovich, along with the Jamaican country representative for USAID, Mr. Jason Fraser, to join the partners at the signing table. They will be signing for their respective organizations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the combined funding for the 3 projects being presented today is over $150 million. 160 at-risk youth in the communities of Trenchtown and Whitfield Town are being targeted. It was interesting to hear Dr. Chang talk about operating in silos, because that's particularly what this project is designed to guard against. You're going to be hearing the words partners and partnership a lot this morning, because it's a collaborative approach that's been taken that's expected to make a significant impact. Because the interesting thing about these projects is that none of them is expected to stand alone. And this is based on the recognition that no single intervention will significantly reduce a young person's risk level. The services that will be provided to the young people participating will range from cognitive behavioral therapy, mentorship, vocational training, employability support, and life skills training. Okay, I think everyone is in position now. Let's start the grant signing with Multicare Youth Foundation. The Multicare Youth Foundation focuses on building character and promoting tolerance and good interpersonal relationships among children from diverse backgrounds and often contentious communities. Their project is called Youth for Tomorrow, and those of us who speak Jamaican Creole know we're saying YUTE. The idea is that they'll provide high-risk youth aged 15 to 29 years with a series of social interventions to reduce risk levels. They'll be focusing on life skills training, structured mentorship, and providing support services for the targeted youth. Also to be signing will be Peace Management Initiative. And you can see all the photographers and cameramen jostling to get the best possible angle. Always an important part of any media event. Now, Peace Management Initiative is one of Jamaica's best-known community-based organizations. They're known for their fearless and grassroots approach to mediation and violence interruption. Whenever there's a flare-up of violence, the country looks to PMI just as much as to the police to de-escalate the situation and restore peace. They'll be implementing a project called Gang Demobilization Transition Program aimed at high-risk youth to improve community security in the selected communities. Now, the Violence Prevention Alliance was launched in 2004, and they use a public health approach to generate and disseminate evidence-based solutions that reduce violence. Their project is called the Community Advancement to Peace Project, and they'll be seeking to reduce involvement in violence as well as reprisals of high-risk youth. Their age range that they're targeting is 10 to 29 years in the 2 communities. The idea is that youth will be identified from those who go to select hospitals with violence-related injuries. The highest risk youth, age 16 and over, will be referred to PMI for follow-up and case management. There again, you're hearing the integrated collaborative approach. The highest risk youth, under 18 years, will be referred to Child Protection and Family Service Agency, while medium risk youth will be referred to other partners for remedial interventions. And there'll be a number of such interventions. So you might have life skills, psychosocial activities, literacy, numeracy, parenting as well, and family strengthening among others. One of the critical services that will be offered to a lot of the young people participating, youth at risk, is called structured mentoring. And I love the idea of structured mentoring, because so often you have mentorship programs that are established and sometimes people don't know exactly what it is they're doing. So this idea of structured mentorship now will provide a framework within which the mentor and the mentee can effectively operate to achieve the goals of the program. So we're coming to the completion of the signing. You know, if everybody weren't wearing masks, I'm pretty sure you would be able to see them beaming from ear to ear. That's one of the things that COVID has denied us. So you kind of have to look at people's eyes to figure out that they're smiling. So they are now displaying the signed copies of the agreement and again, just positioning themselves for the cameras. Now, just to remind you that after the photographs are completed, after this particular aspect of the ceremony is completed, we'll be having the panel discussion. So we're going to be asking you, if you are watching online, don't log off. We're not finished. This is the wrapping up of this particular part of the program, but the panel discussion that's going to be taking place shortly is when we're going to be bringing together a lot of the information you've been hearing. We'll get a chance to hear from the partners themselves, as well as to hear exactly how it is that these programs are going to be working. Now, Multicare Youth Foundation, for instance, I was speaking a little bit earlier about structured mentorship and life skills training, and they'll be providing those services in collaboration with the Ministry of National Security under their initiative known as We Transform. And they'll also be working with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. They'll also be collaborating with the Peace Management Initiative for two components of the project. Again, mentorship. That you're going to hear that over and over. That's such an important aspect of the work being done here. And cognitive behavior therapy. Now, when we talk about evidence-based intervention programs, that's one of the things we're very interested in digging into when we have the panel discussion. So, just about finishing up the signing there. And you can see the three partners, Dr. Deanna Ashley, the Executive Director of Violence Prevention Alliance, Mrs. Alicia Glasgow-Gentles, the Executive Director of Multicare Youth Foundation, and Mr. Damian Hutchinson, the Executive Director of the Peace Management Initiative. Well, they'll be, in fact, among our panelists. So, once again, let me congratulate the recipients, the grant recipients. Congratulations to you all. And we are going to ask you to stay with us for the panel discussion. Now, as we segue to the panel discussion, we're inviting you to watch a very short video that is demonstrating another of the activities that local partner development is working on, this one in Clarendon. Do stay with us. Our panel discussion up after this short video.
Clarendon, Jamaica's third largest parish, is home to nearly 250,000, a significant proportion of the 2.9 million population of the largest English-speaking nation in the Caribbean. The hustle and bustle of May Pen, the parish capital, a rural town that feels more suburban given its proximity to Kingston, the national capital. A place where the reminders of a British colonial past seamlessly coexist with the newer amenities of this busy population centre. But life and times are changing for Maypen, once a teeming commercial centre for thriving sugar and bauxite alumina industries. The decline in these industries have led to the shrinking of the local economy and growing unemployment, especially among the youth, making them ripe targets for criminal gangs.
I'm hoping and dreaming that Clarendon one day will get back to where we were when I was young, where I used to sleep with my windows open down in Michelle Town. Used to don't have any burglar bars on the windows, and everybody was happy. Everybody was moving around, doing what they have to do. So I'm hoping for that day to return.
The Mayor of Maypen is a key voice in the steering committee facilitated by FHI 360 to search for sustainable solutions for youth crime prevention in Clarendon. Mayor Winston Mirage takes a back seat in the meeting, giving other important community players the opportunity to have their say about priority actions for this very important issue. They're learning from the FHI 360's Scale Plus methodology on how to increase collaboration and decrease isolation.
What's really key about the methodology is that it focuses on strengthening systems. So rather than focusing on an individual project or an individual, element, we look across the entire system of actors that may have an investment or that should have an investment in addressing a particular development challenge.
FHI 360 is implementing local partner development, a 5-year USAID-funded activity. Local partner development is intended to provide a holistic approach to enhance capacity and build the sustainability of civil society organizations, social enterprises, and government agencies which are working to reduce citizen vulnerability.
A big part of our work is also facilitating cross-sector collaboration and dialogue towards a safer Jamaica. So we will be piloting in Clarendon what we call a whole system in the room retreat, which is really bringing together in one space a wide cross-section of individuals from Clarendon to brainstorm solutions to the issue of youth crime in their parish.
Recent statistics have shown that young people are both the primary victims and perpetrators of crime in Jamaica, and Clarendon is no exception. The crime rate in Clarendon is among the highest in Jamaica, and sadly, most major crimes in the parish are committed by youths below the age of 29.
Miles away from Clarendon, some 90 community leaders from across the parish gather in a big room, in a neutral space, for a whole system in the room strategic retreat. Here, they are testing their newfound skills for collaboration and corporate action. For 3 days, FHI 360 facilitators deftly teased out of the participants their fears, anxieties, and hopes for their parish, canvassing and collating their own ideas, solutions, and action plans to stem youth crime in Clarendon.
The 3 days have been intense, but very worthwhile in terms of the information that has come out. So we've taken the group from the past and set in the context. We took them through the current situation where they're at now as it relates to youth crime prevention in the parish, and then got them to vision the life beyond 2018. So we took them to 2028, 10 years from now, what they wanted to see, and then we did some planning around that, and then post this workshop, we will look at the implementation.
Now, we're using prenatal clinics for more than vitamins and take pressure. but we are teach parents the way of the future. Good communication skills, proper discipline and good values. For 2028 are them good systems that we are use. Arlene, and I dream you the dream. Arlene, this is the realest regime.
We are here today to give him praise. The South Coast has been developed, full tourism. Nobody's going to the North Coast. They're heading to the South Coast. Amen. Somebody praise God. Amen. Bullhead is now developed. It is now nature tourism, #1 in the world. Somebody could help me praise his name. Our economy is growing at 10% per annum. Hey. Somebody say hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
5 clearly defined projects emerge from the deliberations. 1. Advocacy for inclusion of youth development in government policies. 2. Reintegration of unattached youths in high schools. 3. Strengthening the local economic development entrepreneurial initiative in Clarendon. 4. Development and implementation of a youth mentorship program. And 5. Training and support for parents in Clarendon.
USAID, through local partner development, will provide technical assistance and funding support up to $350,000 to fund the action plans that the participants themselves developed.
What do we do with these young people who are the leaders and are going to influence other subgroups?
Just being here and seeing different persons, different organizations, it motivates me to continue.
You can have the facilities there, and because there's no programs, they're unused or unused. Because I've seen that in Clarendon.
The fact that we can all come together, even though it was tedious, that we can all come together and come up with a solution for crime. That for me is a takeaway, because all of us have the same interests.
We were given the opportunity to share in a very creative manner. That was the bang for me.
Breaking news coming from Caledonia Street in the parish of Clarendon.
It's our first time that we are really being at a workshop where the methodology being used is different from what we all used to.
The retreat is over. The participants board the buses to travel south back to Clarendon. The energy and the sense of empowerment is palpable. Now for the hard work of implementation and sustainability, which is owned by all the stakeholders in the community, like Sergeant Mailer Wallace of the Maypen Police.
We're doing patrol of the town of Maypen. We're actually going along Main Street at this time. Youth crime is very prevalent. Main perpetrators, main victims. They're involving gangs. And even before we came on the road today, we had to deal with 2 students who were fighting in the town.
The FHI 360 whole system in the room retreat represents an inflection point for all stakeholders in Clarendon. Through closer collaborations, business and civic leaders hope to achieve quick and lasting results.
It's about strengthening the program so we do not just leave it there. How does the existing business community assist these young people in identifying what areas they fit into, nurture them to get them to the stage where they can be a part of the business process, to allow them to feel a sense of belonging, because in doing so, that is how you strengthen them. Sometimes we don't even know, as adults, we're not sure what exactly it is that we want to do, much more these younger people. So how do we help them know to identify where they fit into the picture, support them so that we level up Clarendon.
The people of Clarendon are moving forward with confidence. But even more importantly, they are feeling more enabled to harness the power of the collective, to script an amazing future of their own design, and to implement in sustainable ways a better life for themselves, their families, and for generations to come.
Thank you so much for staying with us. And if you're just joining us, we just concluded the launch and grant signing ceremony for the Core Partners Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Program. 3 civil society organizations, the Violence Prevention Alliance, the Multicare Youth Foundation, and Peace Management Initiative, signed grants for amounts totaling over $156 million. That will be used to work on evidence-based youth crime and violence prevention programs. But what does that mean? That's what we're going to be digging into in this panel discussion that we've dubbed Effective Youth Crime and Violence Prevention, Bringing the Right Tools to the Fight. And our panelists are Dr. Deanna Ashley, Executive Director of the Violence Prevention Alliance. We also have Mrs. Alicia Glasgow-Gentles, Executive Director of the Multicare Youth Foundation. Mr. Damian Hutchinson is Executive Director of the Peace Management Initiative, and Mr. Michelle Stewart is Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Specialist at Local Partner Development. I'm your moderator, Dion Jax-Miller. We do welcome your participation all throughout this panel discussion. So if you're watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, just share your comments, share your questions, and I'll be incorporating them all throughout the discussion. Let me start with you, Mr. Stewart, because why 3 different organizations? You know what you want to do. Why not just choose one and dump all the money on that one?
Hi again. Thanks, Dion. Well, 3 organizations, it's really about creating a partnership where youth can access the services that they need in a one wholesome, co-created manner. So we have done a lot of work which involves individual youth being given individual treatment. Or what we're saying, if you deepen the collaboration, if you deepen the partnership, and you actually bring to bear that concentration of identified services to individual youth, you will get a better result. So it's really about deepening the work that the partners have been doing on the ground, bringing new tools and new evidence, and actually helping to identify what youth need as part of their treatment to get youth crime and violence prevention, and then delivering it as one. So that's really the basis of that.
Courtney is watching on Facebook. He's not convinced. He says the culture of violence needs special treatment. Increased employment and employment opportunities by themselves won't have the effect we're seeking if this broader issue isn't tackled. So how does what you're saying answer Courtney's concern?
And Courtney is partially right. So there is no silver bullet. There is no magic wand. But what we're saying is that if you identify those who are most at risk or medium and high risk of committing crime and violence, then you'll be able to see what are the specific factors that influence their behavior. So if you have someone who their main trigger is an anger management issue or they have psychosocial issues, then just giving them a job won't solve those underlying issues. But with the 3 partners we identified here, they are looking at different aspects of crime and violence and looking at what are the risk factors. So what FHI 360 is doing with Local Partner Development, which is sponsored by USAID, is really identifying where we can find different risk factors, the partners who can treat with them, and the partners co-created this intervention. They sat in one room, they did it together, and they are now co-implementing that. So what I would say to Courtney is what we're doing is measuring at the start, measuring as we're doing, and then measuring at the end and see what impact that has.
Well, let's go now to Dr. Deanna Ashley, who is Executive Director of the Violence Prevention Alliance, because you are going to be looking at youth who meet your criteria, who turn up at the hospitals from 10 to 29 years. That's such a spread, and it starts so early. Is that an indication of the extent of the problem?
Well, thank you, Dion, and to everybody else, good morning. The model that we're actually using is based on evidence that from studies that we did on a cohort of children at around the age of 11, which showed that the exposure and experience of violence affected their behaviors and their academic performance. And therefore, the intervention was how to easily identify children who were experiencing acts of violence. We had, at this time, the Ministry of Health, and this is where we developed that program when I was there. They developed a model called Camp Bustamante. This was to identify, it's a child abuse mitigation program, which was developed to identify children who came into the accident emergency department with injuries due to violence or experiencing violence. And based on that, social workers were assigned to investigate what caused and what led to this the injury, violence-related injury, and they would then, based on their analysis through home visits, school visits, develop an intervention which was based on psychosocial support and referral of the high risk children at greatest risk of the event being perpetuated would be referred and managed by CDA, that was just set up at that time, which is now CPFSA, the Child Protection and Family Services. The model also contained a partnership with and referral of the children for follow-up with, in fact, Multicare Foundation at that time, the outreach programs at the Institute of Jamaica and at UTE in their arts and culture program. And what we found was that the children, in fact, improved school performance. There was no recurrence of the violence-related events. And overall, the psychosocial and the behaviors of the children and relationship within the family and school improved. So we adopted that model and implemented it at Cornell Regional Hospital. And then, unfortunately, it was not maintained at Children's Hospital. It ran for 5 years, and then it ceased. Funding lapsed, I think. And then, so we've taken that same model and adapted it to work again, this time in the age group which spreads between age of 10 and 29.
All right, let me ask you
so
to hold on there.
KPH and Bustamante are the focus of this intervention.
Okay, we'll come back to some of those fascinating stuff. But let me ask Mrs. Glasgow-Gentles how the evidence-based approach informed your project.
Well, we have, one of the criticisms of social programming is the ability to show the impact that we've had. So we have a very strong monitoring and evaluation program, or because we co-created this project, our indicators and objectives for the program are set, and the ways that we are measuring or verifying our impact is a coordinated effort. So I think that is what is going to make a significant difference in how we deliver and how we are able to show the results of our work.
Mr. Hutchinson, the issue, we heard the National Security Minister speak again and again about the problem with gangs, criminal gangs, and that's a target of PMI in this program, the Gang Demobilization Transition Program. But one of the things, the attractions we've always heard about gangs is that they provide a family for risk who are at youth. How does your intervention program then seek to replicate or to substitute for that?
Okay, well, one of the critical things that Minister Chang said earlier was that if many of these young men who have gone down the wrong road are given an alternative, that they'll accept it. And that's the first and important part of this program, providing alternatives to mainstream these young men, but while they are being transitioned away from their current lifestyle, that they are afforded the necessary support through mentorship, through the therapeutic interventions, and through identifying a sense of purpose within these persons, identifying the hope that many of them have lost, and helping them create a vision for themselves. And this is important because many of them, the transition into violence-related activity is part of validating themselves, giving themselves a sense of identity. And many of them know no other way. And so this program clearly outlines avenues for these young people to try things differently.
Chevelle Campbell on Facebook says having a cross-collaborative approach will help to reduce the gaps. The problem though, having listened to all of you, and let me come back to Mr. Stewart, is the point that was made there by Dr. Ashley. She spoke about a program that had been in place at Children's Hospital but had not been maintained. And I know you all know where I'm going with this, because this is always one of the concerns with grant-funded projects, you know. The funding comes in, really great work is done, you can even see change perhaps, but what happens when the funding comes to an end? So is it that this is just a temporary band-aid until the end of funding, or have you thought beyond that?
Well, generally, the issue related to sustainability is a real issue. And so what we are doing at Local Partner Development, which is primarily a capacity building project, is really looking at how we can strengthen the internal capacities of the organizations we're working with. So for instance, in the core partner program, these 3 organizations have been working on the ground for a long time. They have had their successes. They have documentation. They have evidence of the work that they do. But also, civil society organizations in general do need to be treated as a third sector and need to see themselves as a third sector. And they require support from both the government and the private sector in order to ensure their sustainability. So one of the things we are looking at is how we can sort of properly document and package the work that we are doing so it can be done by other CSOs, and that we are also providing supporting capacity building to like resource mobilization, to their data collection and reporting, in order to let them to be more sustainable. I would also like to point out that USAID is also focused on the journey to self-reliance. So as part of all the projects that it's funding, including local partner development, it's looking at how we can help the partners to become much more sustainable. The real issue is, how do we fund the activities post-grant implementation? And that requires a conscious partnership. And the private sector has shown interest in both delivering directly and also funding some of the activities. And so even as we are partnering with these core partners here, we do have private sector partners on board who are looking to basically use the program we are having as a pipeline for their actual delivery of social services as well.
Now, when we talk about behavioral change, you're talking about something that can take a good period of time, and it's very, very difficult. So when I hear you, Mrs. Glasgow-Gentle, speaking about the need to document, the need to ensure that you're able to show results, how does that fit, though, with the recognition of the difficulty of effecting behavioral change?
Well, one of the strategies that we use in terms of our sustainability is that we actually have a train-the-trainer model for even Multicare's program for life skills. So the idea is that even after the end of the project, we would have built the capacity of teachers and administrators in the schools, as well as correctional officers, probational officers in the remand centers, to be able to continue the program after we have left. So sustainability is one of the critical areas that we're looking at. It is important for CSOs to be able to sustain themselves, but as well as to build the capacity of other CSOs, other institutions, to be able to deliver the program even after the funding has ended.
Dr. Ashley, you were speaking there of the work with the hospitals that has been done in the past, and again, you'll be working with hospitals. So there's partnership going on here at different levels and within different organizations. How do you go about building that kind of partnership with the hospitals?
Well,
what happens?
It's an ongoing process, and the hospitals themselves see this as an opportunity to strengthen the services they provide to their customers. So it's a win-win, right? And we're using this as a foot in the door again to argue the case and show the evidence that investment in the development and strengthening the social services provided at the hospital, the child guidance and mental health services have a significant benefit to reduce the burden of violence-related injuries on the health services. And it's an investment. It's not a nice thing to do. It's really a cost-benefit analysis can show that this will help to reduce the cost of the care for violence-related injuries. That process has already begun. We don't waste time with the be making the arguments, and both hospitals, I think, see the value, want it to reestablish. We want to make a difference. They want to make a difference in the care and services they provide to their customers. And I think this will help us ultimately getting it institutionalized. I won't give up. I've been at it since 2000, in the beginning of the 2000s, and we don't plan to give up till we have an institutionalized program. We can always support, and I think there will always be need for additional support to whatever the government, the Ministry of Health, the hospitals do, but showing the evidence, the impact it can have, will help to argue the case.
So you would be hoping then that this moves from project to program, because
Oh,
it's
sure.
institutionalization. So the government of Jamaica eventually should take it on.
Yeah, and as I said, we see how having the evidence helps, especially when you can show the cost-benefit side. No, the study is not looking at cost-benefit analyses, but this is a component that we think is absolutely vital, right? To do a cost-benefit analysis to show that this investment is worthwhile.
Shazan McBean on YouTube saying, I appreciate the question about sustainability. This is really a major challenge for grant funding. Indeed it is. Now, it's perhaps auspicious that this is taking place on International Men's Day, because a lot of the time these programs, in fact, we're talking about at-risk youth, we really mean at-risk young men. Mr. Stewart, is it mainly young men, in fact, that are going to be targeted?
It's definitely mainly young men, and it's built on the principle that if you are really concentrating, then you should be doing two things. You should be looking at those who are the main perpetrators of crime and violence, and particularly those who are actually doing it or about to do it, so the high and medium risk. And it also should be looking at the areas where there are high incidents of crime and violence. So what we're doing is we are focusing on young men, and we are targeting those communities which are having the highest rates of crime. So initially we are starting with Trenchtown and Whitfield Town. And when we look at the overall crime statistics in Jamaica, it's frightening. But when we use data and we map it and we see who is doing it and where it's happening, we're beginning to get a stronger idea that in fact it may be more victims and less perpetrators, meaning that you have perpetrators who are perpetrating against multiple victims. So again, rather than spread the limited funds you have targeting women, targeting older males or who are not primarily involved in crime and violence, we identify those who are at highest risk, those who are really costing the society, those who are actually actively engaged, and we spend our funding there. The minister made a point about primary expenditure and the government, and he's 100% correct. It makes no sense we fix those who are in need of our help right now, and we neglect those who are on the brink. So the government will continue to do that and do that primary work, while we'll concentrate in this program on looking at those young men who are most at risk or at medium risk of involvement.
All right, Mr. Hutchinson, let me ask you then, again, looking at the issue of gangs and trying to demobilize gangs, what, if any, role do the parents who may be there, who may be active, what role do they have in your program? How do you interact with them?
Well, a significant part of this program involves empowering the wider community. We spoke of sustainability, and we want to leave a legacy on the ground where many of the community actors themselves can follow the path that we led, and also provide some of the services that we were delivering. It's important that in transitioning these young people away from the life that they know, that we also treat with the family and the support group that they have around them. What we're aiming to do is to reduce the risk factors of these young men down the road getting involved in the negative activities that we've all seen all over the TV. And so getting to the parents, having the parents understand that he's going to go through a process. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to require you understanding what he's going through. It's going to require you being patient It's going to require you giving him space. All these things are important, and that's why the therapeutic involvement of the whole family will we believe, provide greater outcomes. So yes, the broader environment, the family setting, and the individual treatment, all of this put together is what we expect will produce the transformation that we want.
What do you think will be your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge, I think, will be the fact that many of these young men, as the minister intimated earlier, would have dropped out of school quite early and would have gotten themselves involved in these negative networks that they'll find challenging to pull themselves out of that. It's to turn around someone who fell out of school when he was 14. He's now 18 years old and has challenged reading and writing, has a challenge not smoking while in a formal environment. Breaking down all these negative behaviors that he has become so accustomed to is the major challenge. So it requires significant handholding, and it requires a determination on the part of the participants. And that's why those persons being recruited under the program are being asked to make that first step and to admit that, yes, I want a change for myself. Because if they don't want it, it's not going to work.
Dr. Ashley, so the Violence Prevention Alliance, then, as we said earlier, you intervene at the point where they present at the hospitals and they're referred to various agencies for follow-up. Tell me how this fits within the public health approach that your organization works within.
But what we are actually doing there is identifying what is an event that has occurred. It is not primary prevention. This is secondary prevention, because they're actually coming with an injury identified through the injury surveillance system, which is at the hospital, selected through that system based on location, the who, the why, the where, the how the event took place, right? So this is at the level of taking evidence from that data, using that data to determine preliminary determination of risk, doing case assessment to then categorize them in terms of risk, low risk, medium risk, high risk, using the cutoff levels and scores to refer them for follow-up through PMI, and the medium risk that are more suitable for beginning the life skills and other types of intervention. And then some of them now actually have major risks which require referral for mental health services because of post-traumatic stress disorders or other things. Some of that will be done when PMI actually sees them, and some of them will require immediate emergency referral, right? Remember also that a child who, you probably saw an article in the paper this week saying increasing gunshot wounds. One of the challenges we face is in the context of COVID, what is happening? So what a child who comes in at 6 who has been stabbed or has a violence-related injury may not be high risk in terms of them perpetrating a crime, but the event was perpetrated by somebody probably in that age group. And
you said 6?
Yeah, a 6-year-old coming, or a 2-year-old coming being shot, right? Or injured from stabbing or coming unconscious because it was hit in the head. What event that it requires investigation, requires follow-up, and the event itself it could have been generated by somebody in this age group. So so of the target age group and came from that target community. So it's a process of taking every case, looking at the evidence of the case, determination of risk, and what is the appropriate referral and treatment.
Okay, before I start to wrap up, I really want to ask Mrs. Glasgow-Gentles a little bit more about what we heard referred to as structured mentorship, because it seems to be such an important part of the program. And as I mentioned earlier, it's interesting because so often mentorship programs are set up and people don't really know what they're doing. You know, people kind of, making things up as they go along. So what's that about?
So we actually have we acquired YOU, which is Jamaica's premier mentoring organization, a few years ago. So we have 20 odd years of experience in mentorship. So this program, actually, we are matching our young people one-on-one with volunteer mentors. So I'm going to use the time to shout out and ask people to join us in this process as we prepare our young people to be getting that individual guidance that is really necessary for the transformation that Damien is talking about. So through this program, we will be training, because we do a simultaneous training with mentors and mentees, and then there is a matching process. And as you said, Dion, a lot of the mentorship programs will match you and then leave you alone. But in this case, we're going to be monitoring relationships over 12 months. So we're asking the public, those of you who are interested, to reach out to the Multicare Youth Foundation. We will be calling for mentors very soon to join this program. And that is to work with not just youth in school, but youth in the community, as well as youth in remand centers. We're looking to match one-on-one with adult mentors.
Okay, that's fascinating. All right, so in closing, I'm going to ask each of you to tell me what success will look like. So, because you're starting today and the hopes are high and everything sounds great, what's your timeline, Mr. Stewart? And at the end of it, what does success look like to you?
Okay, so this project will be running for approximately 26 months. We're starting in Trenchtown with Pewtown, as we said, and then we're going to move on to another area. For us, and I'm speaking now primarily on behalf of local partner development,
yes.
Success, and local partner development is being implemented by FHI 360, and for us, it's a science of improving lives. So for us, success will be the capacity of the partners delivering these services improved. They're using evidence-based decision-making systems. The interventions or the work that they are doing is devolved, so the other community-based organizations can be involved, and that we see clear, measurable decreases in the risk factors that are affecting the youth. So we are identifying the youth, we are targeting them, we are measuring their risk factors. At the end of the day, we want to see those risk factors fall to such a level that we can say that this youth is no longer in the high or medium risk category.
Mr. Hutchinson, what will success look like to you?
Well, driving down, I met a young man in the traffic who was providing bearer services for one of the financial institutions in New Kingston. And walking down, I saw one of the waiters and these two persons, one of the waiters working here, and these two persons came out of transition programs that we were previously involved in.
Wow.
And that is what we want to bring to the table. We are targeting 160 young men under this program over 24 months. And we hope that at least 60% of these 160 young men will see an individual transition and change in their lives.
Dr. Ashley?
One of the important things is that we would like to ensure that none of the persons who come in with injuries during this period of the project return with violence-related injuries. That's a major event, or that they were involved in perpetuating reprisals or violence events in their communities. So that tracking that behavior and the occurrence of violence-related injuries is an important outcome. The other thing, of course, is to continue to work with the institutions to get, and the Ministry of Health, to institutionalize the services and improve their outreach social services, and and to strengthen the child guidance and mental health services at the hospitals and in the community. Important dimension, because a lot of these youths and children need that type of assessment and support on an ongoing basis.
Okay. And Mrs. Glasgow-Gentles, for you.
For me, it would be transformation. Transformation at the individual level, transformation at the community level, and then transformation at the national level. That is what we are hoping to do. Starting small, it's no pressure, but that's what we're hoping to do, that whatever services, support, and skills that we impart in these young people will have a trickling effect into their communities and then hopefully on the national indicators.
Is there, Mr. Stewart, though, a tracking program of the participants so that you can figure out where they are in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years to see the long-term impact of the various programs?
Well, generally, USAID has a very robust monitoring and evaluation system, and the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative itself has, as part of its focus, the development of that tracking system. The U.S. government and the people of the U.S. have put in their funds, and they want to be able to see where their funds have gone and how successful it has been. So the charges spoke about the 70 million, which USAID and CBS has put in. I have probably been responsible between 2 programs for a good chunk of spending on that. So I really do need to ensure, and USAID will ensure, that there is that tracking program. So that, Alicia say, we can see the transformation, so that the funds that they put in to Jamaica are actually transformed in transformed youth.
Okay, thank you all so very much. We're going to leave it there. So our panelists have been Dr. Deanna Ashley, Executive Director of the Violence Prevention Alliance, Mrs. Alicia Glasgow-Gentles, Executive Director of Multicare Youth Foundation, Mr. Damian Hutchinson, Executive Director of Peace Management Initiative, Mr. Michelle Stewart, Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Specialist at Local Partner Development. Congratulations to them all. We look forward to tracking this very, very critical and important set of collaborative programs that have so much potential to help our at-risk youth. Earlier, we saw the launch of the Core Partners Youth Crime and Violence Prevention Program. I'm your moderator, Dion Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for having been with us.